This is the Voyage Report podcast, where you get the scoop on travel. Now, the editor-in-chief of the Voyage Report, Mark Albert.
Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about travel and food. Who doesn't love food, right? We're joined by Rob Shipman. He's an executive chef that travels the world. In fact, we first met in Casablanca, Morocco. Rob, thanks so much for being here with us.
Good morning. Hi, thank you. Great to be here.
Good morning. Rob is in Japan right now, joining us from Japan. So we really appreciate you getting up. It's night where we are here in the United States and morning over there in Japan. So Rob, let's start off. We ask all of our guests the same three questions here. So let me just ask you, what has been your biggest discovery in all of your travels? This could be a food, a place, something inside yourself you discovered. What would you say has been your biggest discovery?
I think through traveling and working, my biggest discovery has been culture. And because I work with a lot of different people, when I have worked with a lot of different people over the years, so I've worked with Japanese people, Moroccans, Greeks. So just sort of discovering culture and understanding how people work and how they think and how to get along with people.
Yeah, every place you go is a different culture. And what's the favorite place that you've been to?
It's difficult really to say favorite because I think in my mind every country has its unique points. Every country has its good or bad points. Every country's unique, but I really enjoyed working in Japan. I worked in Japan for 7 years. I return to Japan often. So yeah, I've really loved working in Japan for sure.
And Rob, I know you're there now. What's the next place you're traveling to?
My next place will be Ibiza. I'm going to Ibiza next week.
Oh, how fantastic! For work, to cook?
Yeah, I'll be working there for about 8 months.
Oh, how wonderful! Well, let's jump right into it. What are you going to be doing there?
I'm going to be executive chef at a restaurant called Bambuda. It's an Asian restaurant. It's quite popular in Ibiza. It's generally known as the best Asian restaurant in Ibiza. It's very busy. It's the menu is generally it's kind of based on Japanese and Thai with a little bit of Chinese, a little bit of Korean, and a big Mediterranean influence. So they call the cuisine Mediterranean.
So for our listeners who don't know, where exactly is the country?
Ibiza. Ibiza is an island just south of Spain, so it is part of Spain. It's yeah.
And how did you find out about this job? I mean, is there a board or a job posting website for chefs?
I have agents that I use, and I'm in contact with several agents that contact me when jobs come up.
Oh, how wonderful. Is that how you landed in Japan?
Actually, Japan, I returned to Japan with my wife and son. My wife's Japanese, and I found my job in Japan myself. But quite often I get jobs through agents.
Wow. And so what are you doing right now in Japan? Where are you working and what are you cooking?
Right now I'm actually on a break. I'm on holiday in Japan, just spending some time with my family because I travel a lot, so I do need to spend some time with my family as often as I can. So it's just free time now.
So where have you worked in Japan then, and what is your favorite dish to make while you're there?
I worked for Hilton Hotels for 6 years. I worked in Nagoya and I worked in Hokkaido. I worked for Hilton Niseko in Hokkaido for 5 years. Favorite dish to cook? I love making sushi. Any type of sushi. I guess one of my favorites is to make nigiri sushi.
And what is that?
Nigiri sushi is a small, sort of finger-shaped sushi that's squeezed in the hand with the fish on top. Nigiri means to squeeze in Japanese. So you've got nigiri sushi, and then you've got all the rolls.
And so do you mainly cook Japanese where you go, or what are the different varieties of food?
Japanese food is one of my specialities, and I do a cuisine that's kind of a mixture of Mediterranean, Japanese, and some other parts of Asia, like a little bit of Chinese, a bit of Thai, sort of fusion blended in.
This sounds so wonderful. I wish we had a sample plate in front of us here and we could just go down the
Yeah.
dishes and
Sure.
go through them. So tell me, how do you find inspiration when you want to make a new dish or add something to the menu? Where do you get your inspiration for creating that particular dish to make it fresh?
Um, well, sometimes I can imagine what something's going to taste like before I've made it.
Wow.
And so, sometimes I get inspiration. For example, something I tasted in a country that I visited that I really love. Like an example, when I was working in Morocco, I discovered a spice blend called charmoula, and it's a mixture of spices, but it's got chopped garlic and olive oil, so it's kind of like a salsa, and it's got a lot of sort of North African spices. It's called charmoula, so I love the taste of charmoula, and it inspires me to try new things, like for example, mixing a little bit of charmoula in with some raw fish and making a tata, a fish tartare with a North African flavor. Things like this. Maybe not. It's not a way that they would use charmoula traditionally in Morocco, but it's something that inspires me to use it in a new way.
When you said that you can almost taste it before you've made it, it reminds me of musicians who say they can hear the music in their head before they ever write it down on a sheet of music.
Yeah, I think maybe it's similar because I think over the years, trying so many different things, you can often imagine what it's going to taste like. But at the end of the day, when you've actually made it, the proof is in the pudding, right?
Absolutely. I'm curious how your traveling influences the dishes that you make. In other words, the more places you travel, do you think that your creations become more textured or more informed by the last place you were?
I think for the cuisine that I do, then I'd say yes, because I do fusion cuisine, so I like to draw influences from the places I've been. So the more places I've traveled, I've experienced more sort of unique flavors, and each country has its unique taste. So yes, I think through traveling, it's helped kind of broaden my repertoire, so to speak.
So, listeners, Rob and I first met. I was in Casablanca in December of 2016, I think it was, Rob, and we were at this wonderful restaurant, and I was trying this dish of pigeon meat. I don't even remember how you say it in the local language, but it was this. It was so wonderful. I mean, I felt as though I was actually eating dessert. I mean, it was that good. It was like a pastry with the pigeon meat inside. It was absolutely wonderful. And so Rob and I just started talking, and I just found what you do, Rob, to be so fascinating. How did you get into doing this? How did you become a chef? And most of the chefs that I've ever known, they are in one geographic area, but you just span the globe. How did you get into this?
I started cooking professionally 28 years ago. Before that, I was a fishmonger. I worked in a fish market selling fish.
Wow.
I
Where?
did that for 5 years before I started cooking.
And where was that? Where did you sell fish?
In London. Yeah. It was kind of an upmarket fish shop selling raw fish, wet fish, salmon, sea bass, and all the sort of prime things as well, like caviar, lobster, smoked salmon. I did that for 5 years, and I learned how to use a knife there. Then I wanted to. I was interested in cooking so much, so I decided to get a job as a commis chef, as an apprentice chef. And I started to learn how to cook at the age of 22, and I'm 50 now, so it's been about 28 years. I did my training in London, and I left London about 12 years ago. Since then, I've been traveling the world.
What is it about travel, Rob, that appeals to you?
Well, it's exciting to travel because I think now I've kind of got the bug. I'm always excited to see another part of the world, so I'm kind of used to it now.
So what is it like when somebody comes in, maybe they're on vacation, maybe they live in a place, and they come in and they eat one of your dishes, and they single you out for praise to tell you how amazing it was. I mean, we all like compliments. We all like getting a pat on the back. But what is that like? I'm curious because I can't cook with a darn. But what is it like to make a dish that pleases somebody so much that they seek you out to compliment you?
Well, I think it's very fulfilling, and I think it's, as you said, everyone likes a compliment. I think it's human nature for that to be so, and I think it's satisfaction that job satisfaction that drives people to do fantastic things. So I think it's important, and I think it's human nature. At the end of the day, we artists that work hard, they do it for appreciation. So when people really love a dish, then it's a great thing, and I think it's a very human thing, because it's one person sharing something with somebody else. It's sharing their skills, sharing their passion, and when somebody else appreciates it, then it's the work is complete.
And you mentioned the word artist. So when you create a dish, are you thinking not just how can I make this taste great, but how can I make it look great as well?
Sure, it has to look great, taste great, and then there's the textures and the fragrances, the smells. So there's a few different aspects to consider with a great dish.
When I was at CBS News, one of my colleagues did a story about the Instagram culture at restaurants now, and that restaurants and chefs need to be totally prepared for the fact that the guests are going to take pictures of the meal and pictures of the dish and sell it on, share it on social media, and that it's just sort of a thing now, and that
Yeah.
chefs and restaurants have to come to grips with that.
Sure. Yeah, it's quite funny actually. When you say it, I can remember being in the restaurant, and I'm normally in the kitchen, but I quite often come out to meet guests, and when I'm standing in the restaurant area, I can quite often see guests at the table taking photos of things when they arrive. And some dishes, if it's a dish that looks good, then I can see they definitely get the camera out, and I go, oh yeah, they're taking a picture of that one again.
Okay, so you have to be honest, Rob. Have you ever changed a dish to make it more photogenic?
Well, I'd say yes. I mean, basically, every time I make a new dish, normally it goes back to having the recipe in my head, and I'll have an idea how I'm going to make it and what it's going to look like. But then when I go to put it on the plate for the first time, sometimes I'll try it one time and then think, well, no, that's not quite right. Then I'll try it another way, try it a third way. Sometimes I might try it sort of 4 or 5 different ways to choose which way looks best. And not only that for the look, but the same thing with the recipe. With a new recipe, I might try it 5 times, 6 times, up to 10 different times, and each time I might adjust the recipe or the presentation until I find what's gonna be most successful. Once I've decided, then the recipe is on the computer, and I print it out, and it's there for the chefs to follow.
Now, Rob, I don't want to get you in trouble here, but is there a country or a place that you've been where the diners are perhaps more discerning or more appreciative of the meals that you make?
Interesting question. I think that I don't know if I'd say more discerning, but I think each country has its unique food culture. So, for example, in Japan, they're quite sensitive to salt, and they're sensitive to spice. So if the food is salty, I mean, for them, what is salty is a small amount of salt, and for Americans or the UK, they like food. They like food with more salt, so they have a different palate. And Moroccans tend to like food that's very fully flavored, so they don't. If there's not enough spice or if there's not enough flavor there, then they'll say, "Oh, that tastes bland." So, from country to country, each culture has their own sort of palate and what they're used to, what they've grown up with.
So when you move to a new country, do you sort of do culinary survey, if you will? I mean, how do you figure out then what the local culture calls for? How do you figure out that, oh, I've got to put more salt or I've got to put more spice or, I have to adjust this? How do you go about sort of assessing what will fly in that culture?
At the end of the day, I think it's trial and error, and also going out to eat. Like if I arrive in a new country, if I go to eat in the local restaurants, then I'll sort of get an idea about what their cuisine is and what they tend to eat from in their own culture, and then I might start making my menus and talking with people, because through communicating I learn a lot. I quite often talk with waiters, restaurant owners, and talking with the guests. So once I put up a new menu, I'll start talking with guests and getting their feedback. Communication and feedback is always important.
Have you ever changed a dish based on diner feedback?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Really?
For sure. I do it often, and at the end of the day, I'm cooking for the guests, so I've got in my mind things that I think are delicious or things that I'd like to make. And when I make a menu, I'm making a menu for things I love, but also at the end of the day, it's the guests that are going to be eating it. So it's a combination of what I want to cook or what I want to eat, and a matter of what the local, or when I say local, I mean depends on where I am, because it might be for the local people or it might be a mixture of locals and tourists. So I have to consider the demographics of the guest, and then I'll make the menu and the recipes that I think are going to work for that client base.
This is so fascinating because on the one hand, I think it would just be great to have the excuse to go out to eat all the time. Hey, look, I'm just doing research and all that. But on the other hand, I have to imagine there's some level of pressure that comes on this, Rob. When you move to a new country and a new culture, obviously you don't want to be out of sync. I mean, you want to bring your own signature to a dish or to a menu, but there's also got to be a little bit of pressure, no, to try to figure this out and make sure that at some level you're giving them what they want to eat.
Sure. I think that to a certain extent, every business has this element. Like there's market research and product development, and creating a product that's going to suit the demographics of the market. And international companies spend a lot of time and money figuring that out as well. So any company's got to make the product that's going to suit the market. So it's I think at the end of the day, being an executive chef is a little bit more than just making recipes and cooking.
Mm. You're almost sort of a diplomat in some ways too.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess over the years as a chef, I learned a few things, so it becomes a little bit more than just cooking.
Yeah. So can we run down here the countries that you've lived in, that you've cooked in? What is your all-time favorite dish in those countries, either that you've had or that you've made?
Okay. Well, I started my career in London, and I guess London's very international, so you can find every cuisine there. But I started when I started cooking, I learned French cuisine. So just something that comes to mind off the top of my head is fillet of beef rossini, which is not British cuisine. It's a French dish. It's a fillet of beef cooked, and then there's an escalope of foie gras sautéed, put on top, and then it's finished with a Madeira sauce. So it's very classic. That's have you had that before?
No, I don't. But next time I see you, I'm going to have it.
Okay, so fillet of beef rossini from London, which is classic French cuisine. After I left London, I worked in Cyprus. In Cyprus, they have meze, which is a selection of small dishes. It starts with dips and then some salads and grilled things. So from that cuisine, I'd say the dips, and the main dips are terra masalata, hummus, tzatziki, things like that. Really form a great memory in my mind from working in Cyprus.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah. hummus is made from chickpeas, termasalato is made from cod roe, and tzatziki is made from yogurt and mint.
I love mint.
Yeah, yeah. So
And then you
after
had Morocco,
Cyprus,
right?
yeah. After Cyprus, I worked in Japan, and in Japan, one of my favorite things to make and eat, as I mentioned earlier, is nigiri sushi. After I left Japan, I actually went back to Cyprus to work again, and then I ended up in Morocco. In Morocco, let me think. I guess in Morocco, tagine, and there's many different types of tagine. One of my favorite is called it's lamb, and in Moroccan they say kokol jelbana, which means with artichokes and peas. So they put the artichokes and peas on top of the lamb, and they put various spices, and they cook it very slowly for like 2 or 3 hours in a tagine, the traditional clay pot they use in Morocco.
Yeah, and
that's one of my favorites.
That confused me. I took a cooking class there through Traveling Spoon, and it's the name of the dish, but it's also the name of the physical dish that the dish is cooked in. So that was a little confusing to me.
Yeah. So, and apart from that, I did work for some short stints in Ukraine and Switzerland and Italy. So,
what was your favorite dish in Ukraine?
I think one of the things that really amazed me. I'm trying to think of the food, but one thing that really amazed me was the vodka. I tasted vodka there that was so smooth and easy to drink. It was. I was surprised. I'd never had vodka like it before. They also had a lot of sort of caviar and salmon caviar and sturgeon caviar and blinis. Blinis is like a little pancake made from buckwheat flour. So the blini pancakes were very good. Yeah. When I worked in Italy, I have to say I was working in Milan, and the pizza in Milan was amazing. And they make them very thin and very crispy.
Sounds fantastic. Jeez.
Yeah.
Now, am I asking you to violate any trade secrets here? If I ask you, what is a dish that you're looking to make next? Something that you haven't made yet that's rolling around in your mind. You can already taste it. It's on the tip of your taste buds. Something that you want to make next.
In Ibiza, I'm going to be doing some types of new style sashimi. So I'm going to be it's what they call at Bambuda they call the cuisine Mediterranean. It's a twist on the word Mediterranean and Asian. So Mediterranean is that blend of Mediterranean ingredients in the Asian cuisine. So I'm going to be trying some new dishes. For example, I might be using some chermoula in some fish tartare that I kind of mentioned earlier. And some things like that, maybe some sashimi with some Mediterranean herbs, things like that.
All right, so if anyone's planning to visit, what's the name of the restaurant again?
The restaurant is called Bambuda.
All right, listeners, there you have it. Yeah, there you have it. You can put it on your itinerary. Rob, is there anywhere you would not go to be a chef?
I'm pretty open-minded, but I'd avoid a country that's a war zone.
Right, yeah.
Other than that, I mean, I kind of like being in hot places if possible, and to try to avoid the cold. But I'm pretty open-minded, really.
Well, Rob, I used to work in Minneapolis, Minnesota for 8 winters, as I like to say. Not 8 years, but 8 winters. And it goes below, let's see, certainly below 0 Fahrenheit. So what is that? Maybe minus, 20. It can get as low as like below 20 Celsius, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can get pretty cold. So I don't know if that's going to be on your list anytime soon. What does your family think about you being a traveling chef? Do they find it exciting and enjoyable, or are they just sort of along for the ride? What do they think?
Yeah, they find it interesting as well. I guess we miss each other, but we communicate often, and I try to get back to Japan as often as I can.
So they stay in Japan and they don't come with you?
They come to visit sometimes.
Is that hard, being a traveling chef and the family sometimes stays behind?
Uh, I guess, yeah, maybe a little bit hard, but we're kind of used to it.
Right. And what do you make for them when you're home? I mean, do you make all of this wonderful fancy stuff, or do you just say, you know what, I'm tired of cooking, I can't cook anymore?
I quite often cook at home, and sometimes we invite a load of friends over. Last week I did a Moroccan night,
Mm.
and I made a big spread with about maybe 15 different Moroccan dishes. We had two kinds of tagine. We had couscous. We had all the salads. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Wow. And so when you hear from people and they say, "Oh my gosh, you have such a wonderful life. You travel everywhere. I could never go to all those places." What is your message then for travelers who maybe are a little apprehensive about going to some of these countries and perhaps haven't done international travel as much as you have? What is your advice for travelers? Should they get out and explore? What would you say to them?
Um, I'd say, yeah, get out and explore. Maybe for some people, um, uh, they're scared to make the first step, or they've got roots where they are. So maybe for some people it's difficult to travel. But my advice is, if you can, then if you're able to get out and travel, then why not? Go ahead and try. Um, it's been a great learning experience for me.
So we're going to use your advice and use your experience here, Rob. I'd like you to, if you could, help our listeners when we go into a new restaurant in another country. What should we be looking for on the menu to order? I mean, what should we be looking for, to really make sure we're having a great, authentic experience? Do you have any tips for travelers when they're going to an eatery or to a restaurant?
I guess if it's a country that you've never been in, the best way is to find a local person and ask them, uh, "Where's a restaurant where I can taste the real local food?" and get the advice of a local.
Not the
Because
hotel concierge.
yeah, yeah, perhaps hotel concierge may often be able to help, and they can. Uh, Quite often in international hotels, there'll be local staff working there as well. Of course, a hotel concierge will generally know what restaurants are around locally, and especially if you ask a local person working, if there's a local person in the concierge, they'll be able to advise really well on what's great in the local area.
And that's my number one rule is that when I'm traveling, Rob, I don't want to eat, at McDonald's or some chain restaurant or something that's going to say Irish pub here and I'm in Japan or,
Sure,
an American diner and I'm in Budapest. My
sure,
number one rule is that when I'm in a different country, I'm eating that country's food. I think when I was in Budapest, I think I ate goulash like 5 times. But every single time I got it, it was different. I mean, it was a completely different
yeah,
dish depending on the restaurant. I just found it
sure,
fascinating.
yeah, yeah, I agree.
Right. I mean, you can get obviously your favorites at home, but if you're traveling, you want to try something different. You want to try something unique.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah.
What is your favorite place to go there in Japan? So that for those of our listeners who actually go to Japan, and I've been there 3 times, I've had the great fortune of going. So give us some advice where you like to go.
Yeah, it's a very big country, so there's so much choice. But if you can get up to Hokkaido, they have fantastic seafood there. It's famous for crab. They have three different types of crab. It's famous for sea urchin, salmon roe. And also they have very good vegetables there too. If you're there in the summer, they have amazing corn and asparagus. Um, Other parts of Japan, Kyoto. Kyoto is famous for kaiseki, the cuisine. It's called kaiseki ryori. It's the sort of haute cuisine of Japan, which historically came from Kyoto. So Kyoto is a great place to go to for this traditional haute cuisine of Japan. It's the cultural center of Japan. Also in Kyoto, there's many, along with the food, there's a lot of great shrines and temples to visit as well. Tokyo's great. I mean, Tokyo's a big city, but it's got so much choice, and Of course, many great places to try sushi. I'm in Gifu now. Gifu is in the countryside and is famous for red miso, great vegetables, and the quality of beef as well. In Gifu, they have hidagyu, which is a type of wagyu beef, which is very good quality.
Has there ever been a dish that either a diner or the restaurant owner has asked you to make that you've said, no way, not going to make that dish? Has there ever been one dish that someone's wanted you to do?
I don't really think so. Over the years, I've quite often had conversations with owners and about, myself and the restaurant owner would discuss the menu, and sometimes what I want and what he wants not exactly the same, but generally I'm pretty open-minded and I talk things through. But I can't recall a dish that I've said, no, there's no way I'm cooking that. Yeah.
So, Rob, as we're wrapping up our podcast episode here, is there a favorite recipe that you can share with our listeners, something that they can make at home that you like, that you've done, that's really simple, that you can just sort of give us your advice and your tips on how to do it right now?
Okay, Moroccan chermoula, which can be used to marinate fish for the barbecue, and it can be used in other ways too, but I'll give you the recipe for chermoula. You start with some dry spices, about a teaspoon of ginger powder, a teaspoon of cumin powder, a teaspoon of cumin. So ginger, turmeric, and cumin, about a teaspoon of each. You put that in a bowl. You add about a teaspoon and a half of crushed garlic. You add 3 teaspoons of chopped parsley, 3 teaspoons of chopped cilantro, and some roasted red bell pepper. What you can do is roast a whole roasted bell pepper over the barbecue or over a flame, peel the skin off, take the seeds out, chop it finely, add that into the bowl, add about 8 or 10 tablespoons of olive oil, extra virgin, about a tablespoon of tomato paste, and then mix it all together. If it's too dry, you can add a little bit more olive oil. Add the juice of 1 lemon, and if you can get preserved lemon, then they would normally add this preserved. It's a salted lemon which they use in Morocco. You can add about a teaspoon of finely chopped preserved lemon. That's chermoula.
Oh my gosh, Rob! You're going to have to invite us all over so we can try that dish. That sounds just fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that recipe with our listeners. Please.
I'll just explain. Sorry. Once you've made that chermoula, if you get a whole fish and just spread a generous amount of chermoula on both sides of the fish and leave it for about an hour to marinate, and cook it over charcoal, and then serve a little bit more chermoula on the side, then that's a great way. In Morocco, they put that on sardines, and they cook sardines with chermoula. Other than that, if you want to try it in a new way, you can cook some spaghetti, and then put the spaghetti in a frying pan and just add 2 or 3 tablespoons of chermoula and toss it, mix it through, and serve straight away. That's not a traditional way to use chermoula, but it's something I like to do.
Listeners, now you have no excuse for what you're going to have for dinner tonight. Bob, thank you so much for that recipe and for sharing your life as the executive chef of the world, something like that. But it's a fantastic life, and I'm so glad that we met over pigeon meat there in Casablanca, Morocco. Rob Shipman, executive chef, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure.
Listeners, what did you think about what you just heard? Are you going to make that meal? Let us know by rating this podcast, giving us a review, including your comments, and of course, sharing it on social media. We have guests every week talking about travel news and trends, so be sure to subscribe to our podcast. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Mark Albert. Bon voyage.
You've been listening to the Voyage Report podcast. Get the scoop on travel at voyagereport.com.